The month of May has now come and gone, and I'm already more than halfway to my goal of beating 100 games for the 4th consecutive year. Here are my final thoughts on every game I beat in May of 2023 and their rankings based on how happy they made me. Well, let's start off with the good things. If you are a hardcore, and I mean super hardcore Lord of the Rings fan, and you are interested, which I am not, by the way. It's fine. I've seen the movies once. I've never read any of the books. That's about my extent. There may be some value in the gaps that are filled in Smeagol's story. Between when he's captured by Sauron and when he finds Frodo. That is the only good thing that I can think of to say about this game, and I have been thinking about it for a while. This game has managed to fumble almost every conceivable aspect of this game. The larger issues are that it is a game that by its inherent design is not interesting. If you're going to make a game that has no RPG elements whatsoever, no leveling, no skills, no skill trees, no advancement of your character of any kind, no combat, really. There's some stealth killing, but rarely, and that's as close to combat as you get. If you're gonna make something like that and just make it about traversal, platforming, and exploration, you better make sure your level design is on point. You better make sure your traversal physics are on point. You better make sure that your story is on point. You better make sure that technically your game is intact and precise and well made. You've got to, if you're gonna go that hard in that specific a direction, you better have your bases covered when it comes to what you're trying to do. That little that you're trying to do, you better do it right. Not only does this game not do that, for a game that is, like, for instance, Celeste is a really good example of that. There's no combat in Celeste. There's no... I don't remember there being a lot of RPG elements. There might have been... I know there were collectibles, but there wasn't a lot of that stuff. But the platforming was so tight, and the level design was so good, and the story was so awesome that it worked. This game has, not only does it not nail the platforming, it's some of the worst platforming I've ever played in a game. And that's the game. That's what the whole game is. They had one job, basically, to make the platforming fun, and they destroyed it. It is incredibly imprecise. There are invisible walls everywhere. The level design is boring. It's full of glitches and bugs. Things only work right about 60% of the time. So literally, I had died 229 deaths. At least 150 of those were because of bugs and glitches. Because I would just not grab a ledge that I definitely was supposed to. That kind of thing. So the platforming and ledge climbing and all that traversal stuff is terrible. Some of the worst I've ever played. Games like Uncharted have some jank when it comes to like ledge grabbing and that kind of traversal stuff. But A, it's not as bad as this. And B, that's not the whole game. Like, there's other stuff. There's combat. There's a good story. So the platforming is terrible. The level design is terrible. The graphics in this game look like late stage PS3. It's awful. It's really bad. The levels, like the textures of like the earth and the rocks and stuff isn't horrible, but the character designs, I can't remember where I'm looking for, but the characters look bad. So bad. The facial animations are horrible. So just technically, it's a garbage game. Just the way that it's put together is just awful. I don't say things like garbage game very often. I really don't. There are lots of games that people have piled on hate for that I don't understand, and I have to stand up for those games. I loved Redfall. I'm the only person on Earth, I think. But so I'm not just piling on because everyone hates this game. Everyone is right in this particular case. There is nothing to like about this game. I haven't even gone over all of it. It's not worth going over all of it. There is absolutely nothing about this game that has any redeeming aspect to it whatsoever. Honestly, I don't think I've ever gone this far before, but the developers of this game should be ashamed of themselves. They should when they saw what they knew what this was, when they were setting this up and setting a price of $60 on this game, and that's what they were trying to live up to, and had all these trailers for this game and tried to set up all this hype and appeal to the love of Lord of the Rings that some gaming fans have out there, and then seeing this product, knowing what this product was 2 weeks before release, they should have deleted it from their hard drives and completely abandoned it, because it's clear that it's just beyond saving. It is corrupt in its very concept. Like, it should never have existed. The first person to fuck up with this game is whoever pitched the idea, and it was just a series of absolute trash fires all the way up until this game came out. It is so bad. I'm actually going to have to do some thinking as to whether I think this is the worst game I've ever played. And it has a very strong argument. It's absolutely bottom 10, no doubt about it. Probably bottom 5, maybe worse. This is an absolute travesty of a game. And I have felt that way about a dozen times in my entire life, and I've beaten a lot of games now. So I'm ready to put this game behind me and walk away from it forever and never think about it again. But you know what? I know that I will, because when people ask me what my least favorite game is of all time, which people do occasionally, this one's at least going to cross my mind. It's at least going to cross my mind. We'll see. Anyway, it's done. Hallelujah. The worst game I've ever played to this day is back in 1995, a short survival horror game that was absolute trash. But at least that game was short. I think I died 7 times or something in that game. I died a lot more in this one. I think this might be the worst game I've ever played. I think it might be. I'm going to give it some thought, but that's where I'm leaning. Alright, anyway, yes, let's be done. Let's be done with this fucking game. I'm glad that I came back to this game. I rage quit it, and based on some real hardcore, like, time-wasting jank that is common in games from this era. But I'm glad I came back to it, because it is ultimately a good game. There's no game like it. Not that I've ever played. The way the combat system works is totally unique. The story is very unique. It's an interesting gem. and it's got a lot of value in the video game zeitgeist, I think. It's fun at its best moments. It is fun. The combat is great. The leveling system is great. The weapons, all that stuff, it works. All that stuff is great. The way the magic and everything works in it, or parasite energy, is all great. There are some parts of this game that I think are objectively bad. Like parts where you can get into a trap. Even if you're not under-leveled, you can get into a trap where you just don't have enough ammo. Or you don't have an item that you need or something, and because of that, if you don't have a previous save, you are screwed. Luckily, I kept a rolling 3 saves, and I was able to get out of a couple of jams. Or if you get to a point where you just have 1 hit point and there's no way out of the town that you're in, or the area of town that you're in, you're just screwed unless you have a previous save. I don't like that. I think that is objectively poor. And this game has that. And we had to reload a few times because of that. But it kind of comes with the territory when you're playing a game from the 90s, right? I mean, not necessarily. There are plenty of games that didn't do it, but it's not uncommon. And so it's important to keep that in context when you're playing a game like this. But I mean, some of this game aged very well, and some of it did not. We've mostly been over that, but I'm glad that I played it. I'm curious to see how the second game might be different as far as combat and where they're going to take the story. The story was cool, awesome. One of the best stories from this era of gaming, I would say, period. I mean, if you put this up against like Resident Evil or Silent Hill, like, those stories don't make any freaking sense. They're all bonkers. This one's a little bonkers too, but at least it uses some kind of logic. They at least try to explain the story with science. Apparently it's based on a book. I saw that in the credits. I didn't know that before, so that's good to know. That actually explains some of that. Yeah, overall the game's ranking, like where I'm going to like rank it, since I rank everything I play, is going to suffer because of the jank for sure. I mean, it caused me some major distress. I quit this game. I took a week off, played something else, and was thinking I was not going to come back to it. And then after sleeping on it for a few days, I decided, actually a friend kind of talked me into picking it back up. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad that he convinced me to do so. Thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, all in all, I'm glad I played it. I will play the second one at some point, and I'm just mostly relieved that we got through it. Because even after the first time I rage quit, there were at least 2 other times that I thought I was going to have to drop this game because I got stuck. So yeah, we did it. All right, good game. Not great, but good. You know what? Actually, for a very short and very easy game, I actually had kind of a good time with it. It was, like I said, it was very short and it was very easy. It took me about 3.5 hours, close to 4 hours to beat it. I died 1 time, and for what it was, like, it's a cool game. This is a game that I would absolutely recommend to somebody who wants to play like their first video game. Like somebody who's 7 years old. If you've got a kid that's 7 years old or a younger sibling or something, have them play this game. It's really fun, and it's not rocket science, but it's a nice introductory game for like levels, skill cooldowns, special abilities, leveling with currency, potions, healing, that kind of thing, boss fights. It was a good game. I enjoyed it. I don't really have much else to say. I think I was impressed by how much polish it had for being such an obviously indie game. It's obviously not a AAA title, but it didn't. I didn't see a single bug. It was very intuitive. It's obviously built for a 7-year-old to be able to understand how to do it. Technically, it was actually very impressive. The visuals were really cool. The combat was actually really snappy, very responsive. The load times were incredible, best I've ever seen. They were basically instant. But yeah, the combat was really precise and actually pretty satisfying when you have all your skills and cooldowns and everything. It was pretty good. There were some things about it that made it easy to cheese, but I don't think it's designed for someone that's gonna like min-max it. So, but yeah, it was all right. It was all right. I mean, is it gonna rank in the top 100? No, of course not. It doesn't have enough depth, or you know, it's not a rich enough experience to go that high, but it can say something that a lot of games that I've beaten cannot, in that didn't really have anything wrong with it. So it'll have some points because of that. But you know, yeah, it's not going to rank super high, but I don't have a complaint. It's just you know, not really geared towards somebody that, like a 40-year-old man that beats games all the time. This is geared towards somebody that wants to try what video games are, and for that, I applaud it. It's a very good introductory game. I really don't have a complaint. How do you rank a game like this? How do you evaluate the quality of a game like this? Really, honestly, so here are the good things about this game. It's hilarious. If you're into this kind of Rick and Morty style humor, this is hilarious. It's on that level. It's very, very good. Some people hate that kind of humor, and then you'll hate this game for sure, because that's by far the best thing about it. But I thought it was hilarious. I gut laughed 2 dozen times. So is this the funniest game I've ever played? It might be. This might be the funniest game I've ever played. What are some other games I've played since I started doing this that were really funny? Piku Niku was hilarious, but this was funnier than that. So, but like Piku Niku, the humor is the driving force of the game. That is by far the best thing about the game. There are puzzle mechanics and combat and yada yada, just like Piku Niku, but the comedy is really what's keeping it going, right? So, you know, when thinking about where I'm going to rank this game, Piku Niku is a good game to compare it against, because it's good in the same ways, right? So it's hilarious. That's about it, really, when it comes to like what's really good about this game. There's nothing else about this game that's really good. There are some things that are serviceable. The combat is serviceable. The whole mechanic where you're in the chair, you're controlling the guy, you have the ability to change your height and then warp to other places. That is unique, and once I got the hang of it, it was kind of a cool mechanic. And so that was good. But it's not anything earth-shattering. What else? The story was a mess. It didn't matter. It was just a vehicle for the comedy. Everything in this game was a vehicle for the comedy. Yeah, there's not really anything else good about this game. But it was hilarious. Was there anything bad about it? No, it didn't mess anything up. You know, like, it wasn't buggy. It wasn't... they did a very good job of making the game intuitive. Like, with the puzzles and stuff, there were a couple of times where I felt like I might be getting stuck, and right when I started to feel that way, the game would say, like, hey, you should probably do this! So, you know, without making it super obvious. So they did a good job of, like, leading the player through the game. And that's a simple thing that games fuck up all the time. So So that was nice. But yeah, there's not really anything bad about it. Now, the reason this isn't going to rank as high as, even though there's nothing really wrong with it and it was super hilarious, it's not going to rank super high because as funny as it is, and as much as I enjoy comedy, it's not why I play video games. It's just not. You know, I would have almost as much fun, not quite, but almost as much fun watching a playthrough of this as I would playing it, because the interactive part of the game, while it does help some parts of the comedy, it's not really critical, you know. So that's why it's not gonna be like, you know, a super high ranked game, because I don't play video games to laugh. I play video games for a whole bunch of other reasons, but laughing isn't one of them. But for what this game is, it did about as good a job as I would expect. In fact, I would actually say that this game exceeded my expectations, because somebody tells me I'm going to play a funny video game, I'm gonna expect 6 out of 10 comedy, and this was 9 out of 10 comedy. So I love it for that. It makes me very interested to see how they take, since this is like, I think this is the first of Squanch Games, the developer, where they go with it when I play High on Life, which I'd like to do soon. Probably play that next month sometime. I mean, I wanted to play this one first, because I wanted to see how they grew as a development team from this to High on Life, because I've heard really good things about High on Life, and so that was the main reason I wanted to play this. All right, so yeah, good game. I am always impressed with how much I enjoy these classic turn-based JRPGs. It's a genre I didn't play much for any point in my life, but every time I pick one up, I'm like, why don't I play these more? I felt the same way about Final Fantasy 1, and now that I've played 2, I'm looking forward to playing all the other ones. I really am. The big question is, as far as, I mean, so let's not go quite there yet. It does an interesting job with the mechanics. The way that the weapons and characters level is unique and interesting and engaging, even though it's different. The story is awesome. The music is like the best in gaming, you know, the enemy design is great. The level design is, you know, at least good for the time. I don't really have a lot of complaints. The only real question I have, now, is this going to rank like super, like top 50 or something? No, but the only reason that it's not is because this isn't one of my favorite types of genres. Like, I'm still not going to put this as high as like a Dark Souls game or, you know, a Resident Evil game. Most of them, but I don't really have a lot of complaints. It's all just preference stuff. The big question when it comes to where I'm going to rank this game is, do I like it better than the first one? And I've been actually going back and forth on that. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about it. I think the story for the first one, I think I liked a little bit more. But I actually think I like the characters in this one better. And I don't know about the leveling system is the only thing. I'm not sure. It's going to be close. Wherever I rank this, it's going to be very close to where Final Fantasy 1 was, which is pretty high considering how old that game is. Let me just look real quick. It ranked 250. And that's about right, honestly. Like I said, this isn't exactly like my favorite kind of game or anything, but 250, I mean, there's a lot of good games around that area. That's where like Myst is, Braid, Half-Life 2. I mean, there's some great games in that area. That it's not that they're bad games, it's just that they're not like exactly my kind of game. But I really enjoyed it, and I am really looking forward to playing all of the other ones, and I'll get to them someday. They're big games, they take time, but I mean, if we can beat Final Fantasy 2 in 4 days, surely we can beat 3 in 5, because I think they get longer and longer. We'll see. Anyway, I had a blast with it. For the $8 or whatever that this game cost me, best $8 I ever spent. Best $8 I ever spent. So, really, these pixel remasters, they do a superb... Square Enix messes a lot of stuff up when it comes to their IPs. They really mess some things up sometimes, but one thing that they have gotten down pat is figuring out ways to modernize these original Final Fantasy games without losing the flavor. I assume. I actually never played this game in its original iteration, but it feels like an older game. It feels like it plays like an older game, but it's not clunky like those older games, I'm sure, are. So they have gotten that down, where they can these pixel remasters are masterpieces. I love them. I loved the first one. I love this one too. I'm sure I'm going to like 3 through 6. I'm playing all those for the first time at some point. Hopefully I'll get to all the first 6 this year. I don't know. We'll see. But these pixel remasters are great. They have a way of shitting the bed sometimes when it comes to some of their IPs, but not these pixel remasters. Thank God they are amazing. I have heard some complaints that they're too easy, or that they don't like the music or whatever. Fuck that. The music is amazing, and I'm not ever going to complain about a game being easy. So, and I wouldn't call this easy. I definitely had to focus, even with all the cheating I was doing. It's definitely more God of War, which is fun, but I can tell that this is not a mainline entry because it's much shorter, it's much easier, and it lacks the depth of the first 2 games. It lacks the challenge, it lacks the depth of the story, the depth of the combat mechanics. It's more of a relaxing time, which is not what I'm used to with having played the first 2 God of War games. So, but it was fun. It was fun. It was a more of a surface level experience. I don't want to call it shallow because that sounds too negative, but it was a good time. It was. I mean, I beat it in a single day, so it's a short game. But it was good. It was fine. I don't really have a lot of critiques or really great things to say about it. It seems like a game that would be designed for the PSP. It's something you can play on the school bus while you're waiting for class to start. It didn't require a lot of focus to best. But it's another game down, and I'm happy. As I get it. I think the most valuable part of it is that you get a little bit more of that backstory, a little bit more of that lore. And as I'm getting more of the lore playing these games, I'm becoming more and more excited to eventually play the reboot games. That's really what this is all leading up to. But so for that purpose, I find value in it, in that it just fills in a little bit more of the backstory. So yeah, we did it. Another one down. There are 2 types of horror games, to overgeneralize a little bit. There are the kinds where it's all about managing health and ammo, and you can eventually get an assault rifle, and you're supposed to kill everything in the room. And then there's this kind of game where you have no weapons, it's all about running and hiding, and it's all about powerlessness. These horror games, historically, I have not enjoyed as much, because some of the stuff that I like the most about survival horror is the inventory management, the clearing of areas, stockpiling resources, things like that. You don't get a lot of that in this game except for batteries. But all that being said, I think although this isn't necessarily my kind of horror game, this is about as good as it gets when it comes to this type, this kind, the run and hide kind. It's incredibly atmospheric. They do a really impressive job, considering that this game is 10 years old, making it look realistic. There's something about that night vision, behind the camera, visual style that makes it feel very authentic and immersive. And that was really impressive. The game, it is a very immersive game. And I mean, this is a very scary game. It is an incredibly scary game, so it is effective at what it tries to do. Is it exactly my kind of game? No, because you don't gain levels and there's no skill trees and blah, 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 but that's not what this game is, and I can appreciate that. So, you know, I don't know where I'm going to rank a game like this, because I thought 30 minutes into this game, I was thinking, you know what, I'm just not really into horror anymore that much. Like, this kind of horror, like the jump scares and just doesn't do it for me in the same way. And so, like, I'm probably going to bury this in my rankings. But as the game wore on, I got more invested in what was going on. I became more comfortable with the format of the game. And I got really a lot more into it than I thought I would. So I'm impressed. I'm very interested to play the subsequent games now. Whatever comes next. I believe it's just Outlast 2 that comes next. But yeah, very, 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 very scary. Very fun. Very scary. Very interesting. Very well done. There's not very much wrong with this game. It's an interesting open world with lots to do, and I like that formula in the game where you just go around and, you know, take over the raider camps and scout the areas, all that Ubisoft stuff. I like that. And this game is one of the best examples of how to do that formula, right? And so the combat was pretty good. The skills and upgrades and all the currencies that you get to upgrade different things, like all that was engaging. All the RPG elements were fun. You know, I enjoyed the boss fights a little bit. Maybe we'll put that in the negatives category, but it was the combat was fun. The enemies were interesting. There wasn't really a lot wrong with it. There were a couple of little things. It was easy. The game was easy. The only real challenge in the whole game was the final boss. And I was underleveled, and I mean, it was almost every one of my deaths, my 9 deaths, came from falling off of shit. So it was too easy. It was too easy, and there were a couple of weird bugs that I didn't care for, and at the end it becomes a slog out of nowhere, which I didn't really care for. But most of that is nitpicks. For the most part, this is executed pretty flawlessly. The issue is that it doesn't really take any risks. It doesn't really do anything unique. It doesn't really do anything outside of the box. It's like Ubisoft said, hey, here's an idea for a game with all this Greek whatever. Let's just make it the standard Ubisoft open world experience and do a really good job at that. And that's what they did. It's a really good example of that formula. So if you like that formula, you'll probably like this game. If you don't like that formula, you will not like this game. But it's not. It is like a very good vanilla ice cream. It's It does vanilla right, but it is vanilla. It's not that exciting. It's not that unique. I imagine I am going to completely forget about this game within 3 months. It's just not a very memorable game. But it is fun in the moment, doing all the things in the open world, going in the vaults and the puzzle solving and the platforming and the combat. Like, it's all there. There's nothing missing, really. It's just, like, The Division is another great example of that formula, and that's The Division 2 is one of my favorite games ever, but that game, like, it does some real different stuff. It's got that formula, but like the cover combat is really engaging. The loot is really interesting. The story's whatever, but it's like it's got stuff that gives it an identity, right? Really, all that gives this game its identity is the art direction. I can't think of anything else. Like, that's what I'm going to remember the most about this game is the visual design. Because that's the most unique thing about it. So, it's not a bad game. It's a good game. It's just, when I think about where I'm going to rank a game like this, I have to put it against games that actually, like, had the balls to take some risks. And this game doesn't really do that. It's just like, if you like that Ubisoft formula, you will like this game. But I doubt this is anybody's favorite game of the games that do that. I mean, if you're really into Breath of the Wild type games, maybe this one you like particularly well because it's very Breath of the Wild. It wears that inspiration on its sleeve. It is a perfect marriage of the Ubisoft formula with a Breath of the Wild type game. And that's not bad. That's a pretty good selling point. I would imagine a lot of people would like that. But it's just a fun game. I'm not going to remember much about this game later, I can tell. It's just not a very memorable game. And it was too easy. I'm going to have some good things and some bad things to say about this game, but all in all, it should be noted that I did quite enjoy the game. It is very good. I had pretty high expectations for it, which is why I'm not necessarily blown away. If I had gone into this game with no expectations, I probably would have been blown away. But I expected to love this game, and love is a bit of a strong word. So there's some really great things about it. The story is amazing. The voice actors and the writers did an awesome job of making these characters their own, while still kind of making them like the MCU characters a little bit. That's a tough job. That's a really tall order, and they did a really, really good job of making this game really tongue-in-cheek without being cringe. It was genuinely a funny game, and doing that with people that like kind of sound like the MCU characters but aren't quite like it, they did a much better job with that here than the Avengers. Now, the Avengers voice actors were good, but I don't think the writing was nearly as good. The writing in this game is much, much, much better. So that was great. They did a great job there. The way the combat works is unique. It's a different kind of fun than I am used to having in a game like this, and so I think they pulled that off pretty well. It's the commanding, like the tactical aspect of it, without really getting too tactical, is pretty fun. The game's not that hard, really, but they still made it They still did a good job of making it feel frantic and chaotic and intense, without making it too hard. So they did a good job with that. Those are the main big high points. Is the combat was fun, and the game was very well written and very well acted. There are some things that aren't bad things about the game, but they're just not as much for me. It's very narratively driven. There's not really a lot of agency for the player for most of the game. The only real agency you have is you get to make some dialogue choices that appear to be important throughout the game. And that's about it. There's not really... There's not the levels are very linear. There's dialogue almost constantly. This was actually a really hard game to do in this format because usually I talk through these games, and I couldn't really do that with this game because they were constantly talking. So it was really a lot like watching a movie in some places. It was very linear. Like I bet the speed runs for this game are a nightmare. I bet people really struggle with the speed runs for this game because it kind of goes at its own pace. You don't really have control over how quickly the game goes. The only way you can slow it down is by just not moving. And then really the only way you can speed it up is probably through bugs, like exploits. Because I don't know how else you would be able to do it otherwise. Just beating the combat encounters really quickly, I guess. But yeah, so that's not a critique. It's just that I didn't enjoy that as much as I would have something... Like, I actually really liked in Avengers the way that the combat and traversal and missions worked there because it seemed like I was more in charge of the flow. This isn't that kind of game, and I recognize most people like that better. I'm not saying I don't like this as much as Avengers. I'll have to think about that, but I don't know how I feel about that because I actually kind of liked Avengers. There were some bugs, some pretty bad ones, a couple of times, that were bad enough that I had to reload checkpoints. The game's a couple years old now. Those should be patched out, but I guess that's just going to happen from time to time. But they were, I would say, worse than average for a game this old. So, you know, some points lost on that. And then, what was the other thing? Again, this is not a problem with the game necessarily. It's a reason that it's not going to rank in the top 50 for me because of my preference. The lack of RPG elements is hard for me to get behind. Even something that's linear, like, you know, like the Resident Evil 4 remake is fairly linear. Something like Dead Space 2 or The Evil Within. Those are some of my favorite games of all time. Those are horror games, but you get the idea. They still have, like, you get levels, you have skill trees, you have gear that you can pick up. There's loot. There's you know, that kind of thing. That doesn't make the game objectively better, but it makes it more palatable for me because that's just the kind of game that I like. So when I consider whether a game like this is going to rank higher based on how happy it made me against something like Marvel's Avengers, I have to take the good things about this, like the story, the writing, the unique combat system, things like that, and weigh them against things that maybe aren't that popular among all gamers, or they have a bad stigma, like loot systems and open worlds and RPG elements and things like that. And I have to decide, well, what's more important to me, you know? Because it's not about deciding what game is better. If I'm ranking my games on which one's just objectively better, Guardians of the Galaxy wins with a bullet. It's not even close. Marvel's Avengers was a deeply, deeply flawed game. This is not a deeply flawed game. This is a pretty pristine game, except for a couple of little things. All of the things that I don't like about this game are just based on my preference. I know the way I'm talking, I'm making it sound like I've already decided I like Avengers better, but that's actually not the case. If I had to guess, if I had to flip a coin right now, I'd probably say that I did like Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy better, but I don't know that for sure. I'll have to look at my rankings. Basically, I recognize a lot of the value in this game, and I did thoroughly enjoy it. It's gonna rank high, but I could have seen this game be like a top 25 game before I started it. I really, really wanted to play this game, and it's not going to be a top 25 game. It's not. It didn't make me that happy. It didn't make me happy enough for a top 25. Did it make me enough for a top 100? Very possibly. And that's really good. But I want to say Marvel's Avengers is in the top 100 too. So I don't know. We'll have to see. But anyway, I really, really enjoyed it. And you know, I look forward to seeing if they're going to try and extend this franchise out, especially with this developer switching publisher hands and how it didn't do that well commercially and all that stuff. So I don't know. I hope they try again, because it seems like they set it up for a pretty good pretty well for a sequel, and I would like to play that. I think that this game does a good job of building on the story and building on the skills and the Metroidvania-y type abilities that it throws in, like making new ones and not doing that thing that games do sometimes where it just resets your progress and you just learn the same skills over again. It didn't do that. That was nice. Technically, as far as like voice acting and visual design and all that stuff, looked great. It was a lot of more of the same, but it felt heavier, darker, weightier, kind of like in an Empire Strikes Back kind of way. I liked that. I appreciated that. It feels like a planned trilogy at this point, so I'm curious to see where it will go. I will certainly play the new one on day one if I can. But I do have some problems. It is a buggy mess. It's very buggy. You know, that's a launch thing now. I guess if I'm going to be playing games at launches, I'm just going to have to get used to that. But this one in particular was pretty rough. Not game-breaking, but pretty rough. I did not like that they kept all the cosmetic stuff and didn't add any actual utility to the loot. I actually freaking hate that. That's my least favorite part of the game. But that was also true in the first game. That was an opportunity, I thought, for improvement. I guess a lot of people like the cosmetic loot stuff. So maybe, you know, it's fine for a lot of people, but it is not fine for me. It's boring. It makes me not care about... I just don't care about opening chests, you know, or getting different currencies that you can just buy cosmetics with. It's just, ugh. It was like Kena Bridge of Spirits all over again. So I think they missed an opportunity there. And then the final thing, and I think maybe the biggest problem... Well, no, I think the loot problem is the biggest problem. The second biggest problem, though, is that it was too easy. This is the easiest Souls-like I have ever played, and it's not even close. 13 deaths in a Souls-like? Now, granted, the way they handled fall damage and falling off buildings and stuff, those weren't true deaths because they just damaged you a little bit. But there's a lot of Souls-likes that I've played that do that I've died a lot more than 13 times in, like the Surge games or Asterigos. So that's not really an excuse. There were two parts of this game that were challenging, and they were boss fights, and they were the only two parts of the game that I thought were really, really awesome. And even those, I only died 4 times, maybe 5. I think I died 5 times at the end. I want to say I died 3 times at the other boss fight. That's a red flag for a Souls-like. Part of the fun is the challenge, and there just wasn't a lot of challenge here. The game was still fun, don't get me wrong. The level design was great. The traversal mechanics were great. The combat was fun. The skill trees were awesome. There was still a lot to enjoy when it comes to those like Souls-like type things, or I guess action RPG type things more broadly. But it's missing a piece. It's missing a piece of the great Souls-like formula. If you only die 13 times. And granted, there are difficulty settings in this game, and I picked normal because I always pick that on normal. But I always pick normal, and for me, this was not a normal core experience type of thing. The game was easy. On normal. So maybe it's just a matter of the way that they handled the difficulty settings. But if that's the case, I want to ask the devs, what difficulty is this designed to be played on? And the only reasonable answer to that is normal. And so if you're going to say, if the devs would say like, well, you really should play it on hard if you're wanting that kind of experience, because that's the way it's really designed to be played if you're that kind of guy. Well, then that's normal. Then make that normal. You know, there are a few games out there, like Alien Isolation is a good example, where when you choose the difficulty levels, on the hard option it says, this is the way the game is designed to be played. On hard. And I chose hard on that game. And it was hard. When I looked at the meters for all the difficulties, like damage and health and all that stuff, it was right down the middle when I picked normal, so... They need to do some rebalancing or something. It was too easy. I mean, the first game was one of the easiest Souls-likes I've ever played, but this one's number one with a bullet. But overall, I still loved it. You know, the story is great. The gameplay is great. I can live with the bugs, and I can live with the difficulty. And I can live with bullcrap loot, you know. B-, basically, you know. It's like you passed. It's good. It's still a great game, you know. There's just a couple of pieces that were missing that kept it from being awesome. This is a great game, but it could have been an amazing game with some really simple tweaks. Well, I don't know about the bugs. I don't know how all that works. That's probably a lot more complicated, but here we are. So, great game still, just not transcendent. Couple things keeping it back. Oh man, you know, I think I like this game a lot more than most people have seemed to on the internet. It's the world that they built is really interesting. I think the open world has got a lot going for it. It's a unique open world, but it still has a lot of those open world kind of tropes. So it keeps the fun part of that, but leaves the boring part out. That's just my opinion. The loot grind is super fun. Big fan of the loot grind. It's not the best I've seen, but it's good. It's good. It's like almost Borderlands good. It reminds me a lot of The Division, actually, because it's all guns, you know. So, and it's fun. Well, I guess Borderlands is all guns too. Anyway, it's a good loot grind. The loot grind's a lot of fun. I like that rarity based stuff. Like, I can forgive a lot of bad stuff in the game if it's got a good loot system. You know, there's some, like, the story, whatever. The story didn't grab me, but it didn't seem to matter. It was, there were some problems. There were definitely some problems. It is a buggy mess. The game crashed on me, I think, 7 times. Sometimes in critical points where I lost a good deal of progress. The UI is messed up. It'll say I have 0 med kits, even though in the menu it says I have 8. And then after a while it'll just correct itself. And then it'll be wrong again. And that happened with ammo, health, key items, all kinds of stuff. So there were lots of bugs, lots and lots of bugs. Got stuck in the environment a couple of times, that kind of thing. And the UX is not very good. The map has weird issues. It won't put my objective markers on my HUD for me. I have to do it manually every time. It's just like stuff like that. It's like, guys, you should have figured that out before you release the game, and that should be working. There was a bug once that we talked about the UI, so that handles that. But I don't like how games do this cursor on the screen when it's a console, for a console. To stop doing that. That's not fun. Nobody likes that. Only PC gamers like that. You know, so the bugs really held it back, and the UI really held it back. But overall, I still like this game a lot more than it sounds like the average person does. I've read some of the reviews now. Once I got about halfway through the game, I started reading some of the reviews, and boy, people really hate this game, but I don't understand all of the vitriol. It works just fine as a single player game, by the way. If you're interested in playing this kind of game single player, it's just like something like Borderlands, where it's like, obviously it's built with co-op in mind, but you're totally fine to play it single player. It's not like something like Back 4 Blood, where it like really suffers if you play it single player. That game was not very fun single player, Back 4 Blood. This game was fine single player. It's obvious that it's designed with co-op in mind, but it didn't bother me as a single player for this game. So yeah, I think I like this a lot more than the average person. I really enjoyed it. I just fucking hated the bugs. That was the main problem, was the bugs. The bugs were really bad. And I thought the boss fights were good. I don't think they were great. I think that one of them was pretty great. But most of them were, I think, serviceable. And I could see how they'd be more fun co-op. But they were good. They were fine. Single player. So I guess that's the key takeaway. It's messed up, but it's not quite as messed up as I think a lot of people are saying online. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I haven't played a vampire game in a minute. That was fun. So yeah, I would recommend it if you're into that kind of thing.
That's it for the month of May, and it brings us to a total of 53 games beaten so far in 2023. Have you already beaten any of these games? And if so, did you feel differently about them than I did? Let me know about it in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more gaming videos. Thanks for watching!